Hello, I'm Elizabeth Vasquez, CEO and co-founder of WeConnect International, a global nonprofit leading the way on gender-inclusive sourcing by supporting women-owned businesses in 130 countries seeking access to business opportunities with our member buyers, including many of you representing over $1 trillion in annual purchasing power. I want to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation team for bringing all of us together for this 12th annual International Women's Day Forum and for hosting this incredible panel on global perspectives on women in the world with key thought leaders, including Kate Benkin, Vice President, Lead of Microsoft Philanthropies for Microsoft, Laura Lane, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer for UPS, and Rachel Vogelstein, Senior Advisor for the White House Gender Policy Council. As all of you know, women are at a milestone moment right now. The COVID pandemic and now the crisis in the Ukraine has challenged women and their families in immeasurable ways, but have also provided opportunities for incredible innovation and for growth. Each of these expert panel members come at this topic from a different place. So from your vantage point, what is the current state of women in the world? Let's start with Laura, and then Kate, and then Rachel. Laura?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Well, I believe the state of women is that they are strong and they will overcome any of the challenges that they face. But what we've seen is women have borne the brunt of this pandemic. The reality is they socioculturally have been the ones that have had to not only maybe keep working, but also being caregivers to their children who, with schools having gone into virtual settings, as well as caregivers for their elderly family members. And we've seen a lot of women-owned businesses really be challenged in terms of keeping their operations going. But if I know anything, I know when women thrive, humanity thrives. And that's why UPS has been on the front lines, making sure that throughout this pandemic, we've been providing those helping hands to women to get their businesses back up and running, being advocates for them internationally in terms of eliminating those barriers that make it harder for them to not only overcome the challenges of, economic activity during a pandemic, but the fundamental challenges of running a business. And third, we've been out there when crisis has hit, above and beyond when the pandemic has challenged them. We've been there with humanitarian relief, and right now we stand with the women and the children that are crossing the borders right now from Ukraine. UPS is standing up $1 million of relief. We're putting our expertise in terms of logistics, as well as our people and our ability to respond in the times of crisis like we did during the pandemic, bringing it right there to help the people of Ukraine as they're crossing into neighboring countries. And so the state of women right now is challenged, but I know that they are strong, and we just need to be thinking about what we can do in concrete ways to support them get back on their feet, grow their businesses, and help them continue to provide for their families. And in that regard, economic empowerment of women is a UPS core value, which is why we're going to keep doing all that we can to support them on all of these fronts. And I know we'll go into a deeper discussion on that throughout the course of the panel. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Wow, thank you, Laura. Kate?
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Laura, for those comments, and congratulations for everything that UPS is doing with this terrible situation in Ukraine. When we think about, we know that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And this statement, I think, is especially true for women and girls. One of the greatest challenges facing women today is the lack of economic opportunities, which in turn deprives women of opportunities for empowerment, for economic freedom, for social mobility. And as we heard from Paloma and from Laura just now, COVID's only heightened those challenges for women and girls, including increasing the risk of violence, job losses. The caretaking burden has fallen disproportionately on women. And too many women around the world still face structural inequalities that are creating barriers to finding quality employment, quality livelihoods, and a feeling of safety in their communities. That being said, from my vantage point in the tech sector and within Microsoft Philanthropies, I also can't help but feel optimistic. I see the opportunity that technology presents for women and girls. It can help empower them to access services, to engage with each other, to pursue economic opportunities. And one of the things that we focus on is you can't benefit from technology if you don't have the right skills. And so we need to create opportunities for women to gain the digital skills that they need to improve their livelihoods, gain employment or micro-entrepreneurship opportunities. And this focus on digital inclusion anchors a lot of the work that we do in Microsoft Philanthropies, with the idea that every person, every woman, every girl in every community around the world should have the opportunity to get the skills needed to secure the jobs of today. And we do that by partnering with fantastic nonprofits all around the world to help equip women with digital literacy, digital skills to help empower them in more ways. And we know that when we invest in women, there's a multiplier effect. I like how Paloma referred to women being catalysts of action. And we know that when women are able to work and access quality jobs, they're more likely than men to invest a higher proportion of their incomes back into their families and communities. So there's a lot to do, but I also feel optimistic about the state of women in the world, because I see some of the fantastic work that our nonprofit partners are doing that's making a real impact to address these challenges. A couple of examples. In Japan, we work with a great organisation called Single Mothers Sisterhood to help single mothers, which is one of the most underserved segments in Japanese society. In Latin America, we partner with MasterCard and UN Women to help bring digital skills and financial skills to women. So I think, there's just a couple of examples. There's huge challenges, there's a lot to do, but there's also cause for optimism.
Thank you for leaving us with that note of optimism. I appreciate that, Kate. Rachel?
Well, I want to start by thanking our hosts for organizing this important discussion today, Elizabeth, to you for moderating, and to my co-panelists. It's great to be with all of you. I also want to echo my U.S. government colleague and acknowledge the bravery of the people of Ukraine and the hundreds of thousands of people, disproportionately women and children, who are being displaced. In answer to your question, this is a challenging moment for women in Ukraine, in Afghanistan, in Ethiopia, and in other regions of conflict and instability. And it's also a challenging moment for women globally, as was already recognized in our discussion today, as we recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as we know, has fueled an economic crisis, a health crisis, and a caregiving crisis, each of which has had disproportionate effects on women and girls, and especially women and girls of color. We know that here in the US, it took just 1 year to erase 30 years of progress in women's labor force participation, that millions of women lost their jobs or were forced to leave the workforce or cut back on hours to take care of their families. And as I'm sure this audience knows well, this trend was reflected globally. While women make up only 39% of the global workforce, they account for well over half of pandemic-related job losses. And of course, we also saw reports of gender-based violence rise dramatically, both here in the US and around the world. So the pandemic has really shone a light on these pre-existing disparities and inequities, and it has reinforced that our economy simply cannot reach its full potential if we are leaving half of the population behind. It shows that our efforts to promote gender equity and equality are more essential than ever. And that's why this has been a priority for the Biden-Harris administration from the start. Last year on International Women's Day, President Biden issued an executive order formally establishing the White House Gender Policy Council, which builds on previous White House women's initiatives in the Clinton and Obama administrations, but it's also carving a new path. The Gender Policy Council works alongside other White House Policy Council, including the Domestic Policy Council, the National Economic Council, and the National Security Council, to advance gender equity and equality across our government. It's comprised of virtually every cabinet secretary, and we have a dedicated policy staff here at the White House. Years of research have shown that when women are better off, everyone is better off. We know that gender equality is not only a matter of human rights, justice, and fairness, but it's also a strategic imperative for the United States government, for nations around the world, and of course for the private sector.
Wow, Rachel, thank you for that sobering assessment of where we are. As you noted, the White House has put a tremendous focus on gender equality and equality writ large. And the council, only a year old, has done some incredible work already. Can you give us some specific examples in line with your priorities and the progress you're already making?
Absolutely. Last year, in that same executive order that created the Gender Policy Council, President Biden mandated the development of the first ever strategy, national strategy, to advance gender equity and equality through both domestic and foreign policy. And we are proud that this past October, the administration issued our country's first ever such strategy. It was the product of a robust consultation process led by the Gender Policy Council and was informed by input from every White House component and agencies across the executive branch. You know, the strategy is significant for several reasons. First, because it's the first. It's the first time we've ever had such a strategy, and really speaks to the administration's commitment to gender equity and equality. Second, because it's the first whole of government effort to advance this critical priority, marshaling the capacity of every department and agency across our federal government. Third, the strategy is significant because it advances gender equality through both domestic and foreign policy, for the first time really uniting our efforts to close gender gaps both at home and abroad. And finally, it's significant because it really demonstrates U.S. commitment. There are really only a handful of other nations that have created national gender strategies, and we are hopeful that our doing so will have a catalytic effect on the world stage. The strategy itself offers a set of guiding principles for the administration's work, including that we employ a whole of government approach and that we take an intersectional approach that recognizes overlapping forms of discrimination on the basis of gender, race, and many other factors. The strategy identifies 10 interconnected strategic priorities, which encompass economic security, gender-based violence, health, education, justice and immigration, human rights and equality under the law, security and humanitarian relief, climate change, science and technology, and democracy, participation, and leadership. And the strategy recognizes that these priorities are inherently linked and must be tackled in concert. The strategy also outlines an implementation plan to ensure that it's not just words on paper, but is actually implemented in practice. And right now, every federal department and agency is developing its own strategy implementation plan. But even while that work is ongoing, we've already made progress in our first year on many of the priorities identified in the strategy. So with respect to improving economic security and accelerating economic growth, to build back better and achieve an equitable recovery, both at home and abroad, we've been working to ensure that all people have access to good, well-paying jobs by investing in care infrastructure and addressing persistent gender discrimination and systemic barriers to workforce participation, including pay inequity, by strengthening women's economic empowerment globally through the Gender Equity and Equality Action Fund that was announced last year, which is focused on advancing women's economic security around the world. We've also taken strides to prevent and respond to gender-based violence by working to reauthorize and expand the Violence Against Women Act, building on President Biden's leadership on that issue, by developing and strengthening comprehensive national and global policies aimed at addressing GBV, including by developing the first ever national action plan on gender-based violence, which is underway now. We've launched a global partnership to address online harassment and abuse on the margins of the Summit for Democracy, given the link between that issue and women's political participation. And we are addressing gender-based violence abroad, including sexual violence in conflict settings, and by updating our national plan to combat human trafficking. We're also working to protect, improve, and expand access to health care, including codifying the constitutional right in Roe and promoting women's health care at home and abroad, addressing the pernicious effects of health inequity, including by addressing the maternal mortality crisis here in the US, which has a disproportionate impact on Black and Native American women, and by strengthening the healthcare workforce abroad, which is disproportionately female, and addressing maternal morbidity and mortality globally. And finally, we've been advancing women's full participation in democracy, representation, and leadership. We've launched an initiative to advance women's leadership and political participation globally at the Summit for Democracy. And we've worked towards gender parity and diversity in leadership roles, which has really been a hallmark of the administration, which has reached gender parity in our cabinet for the first time ever, thanks to the president's commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. He's appointed a record number of women and people of color, including the first woman to serve as Treasury Secretary, the first woman to serve as the Director of National Intelligence, and the first Native American woman to serve in the cabinet. And we've been focused on promoting leadership of women and girls in peace processes, in national security and defense, in global health and humanitarian efforts, and in climate change tables. So we'll continue our efforts to implement this first ever whole of government strategy to advance gender equity and equality across both domestic and foreign policy work. And we look forward to doing it with partners, both inside and outside of government.
Rachel, thank you so much for your leadership and congratulations on all the progress in only 1 year. It's incredible. Laura, you also have vast global experience and you know firsthand the impact of women being empowered and in control of their future. In the past, you've talked about legal frameworks that can hinder women's progress, but when laws change, opportunities are created. So could you give us an example and shed some light on other barriers women currently face?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, Elizabeth. It's been one that I have been personally passionate about and one that UPS has made a top priority for advocacy. We started our advocacy efforts in the context of APEC discussions and then took it into the WTO to basically make the case that we want to help women be able to thrive in the global economy, but they can't thrive if they can't own property in their names. They can't open a bank account. They can't get a loan without a male co-signer, that they can't move freely, across borders or within a country or engage in certain kinds of economic activities. I will tell you, we have some of the most amazing UPS women drivers in our company, and there's still prohibitions on women being able to engage in certain kinds of activities like being, a package car driver in certain countries. And so we wanted to be champions for changing those laws and regulations, because once you eliminate those barriers, you're enabling, 50% of the global workforce to engage in amazing economic activity. I'm really proud of the fact that in the WTO, one of the important things that got accomplished at the end of the year was changes in the domestic regulation agreement that said you cannot discriminate in trade rules on the basis of gender. That was groundbreaking because that is a foundation that women-owned businesses can stand on. There's a lot more work that needs to be done because in making those WTO commitments, you also have to translate them into domestic laws and regulations, but we are a voice for that change. We're also a voice for saying, okay, if we want to show you the economic power that women represent in every country in which we serve them. We operate in 220 countries and territories, and we've made support for women-owned businesses wherever they are a top priority for our company. And we've done it in several ways. We have done it by supporting them with the financial resources and the training through an awesome program we've got that's called UPS Ignite, where we basically help women get engaged in more economic activity, giving them the resources. Elizabeth, we partner with We Connect International in this awesome program in the United Arab Emirates. as just one example, where we're really empowering women in the Middle East to have that access to the financial resources so that they can succeed. We're doing it in other ways as well, giving those all-important grants and additional financial support directly through a program that we've got that's called Proudly Unstoppable. We want to make every woman owned business unstoppable in everything that they do. So we champion the changes in the laws. We give them the resources to be able to take their businesses to more markets around the world. And importantly, Rachel, I have to give this a call out. We partner with great government, partners like the U.S. government, working on ways that we can help not only give the resources but change the laws. One that comes to mind is the awesome program we're doing with the Department of State with the Academy of Women Entrepreneurs in Mexico is just one example. We're doing it in Vietnam. We're doing it in Nigeria. Anywhere there are women who need that help to be able to engage in more economic activity, we're making sure we're right alongside them, providing not only the financial resources, but that megaphone that says, change the laws, give women the opportunities, they will rise. And in turn, global economies will rise.
Wow, I love your passion, Laura. And I love working together in markets, the US, Canada, Germany, China, UAE. I mean, it's incredible. And similarly, getting to work with Microsoft and what you're doing in Australia and many other markets to create equal opportunities. But Kate, the pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of technology in many domains. What innovations have you seen in the tech space that have improved the lives of women and their communities? And how is Microsoft working to increase the number of women around the world with internet coverage?
Well, when we think about digital equity, we think about connectivity, but also skilling and affordable devices. And it's a little chicken and egg in a way. I mean, even for those who have an affordable broadband connection, if a lack of digital literacy or devices or other socioeconomic issues can persist as barriers to entry. If women and girls don't have access to broadband connectivity, they can't unlock digital skills. And if they don't have digital skills, then it's hard to realize the potential offered by connectivity. So access to broadband is critical. It's really in some ways like the electricity of the 21st century. Without a proper broadband connection, people can't run a business online, can't access telemedicine, can't take an online class, students can't participate in remote education. And of course, we've seen that over the last few years with COVID. And so we've sought opportunities to work with our with government, with nonprofits, with others in the private sector to help bridge the digital divide by addressing these issues in the specific context of gender equality. And so we're looking at how to deploy connectivity solutions and better access to opportunities and also to learning platforms to get the digital skills that are just so critical. And when you think about internet coverage, this issue is especially pronounced for women and girls, where we are not yet at gender parity for internet usage. The divide, for example, in least developed countries is like only 19% of women in least developed countries are using the internet, which is about 12 percentage points lower than men. So we have already undertaken several commitments. We have an Airband initiative that's focused on bringing broadband to unconnected communities around the world. We've also partnered with USAID to bring internet access to more women around the world, and we have projects being deployed with our Airband partners in Guatemala, in Ghana, India, Colombia, Kenya. Another great partnership that we have is we're collaborating with Unilever to support a new generation of female entrepreneurs. And we've launched an initiative there to deploy connectivity solutions to increase the number of women that can access and leverage the internet. And I think this is a good example of the power of partnerships, by bringing Microsoft's technology and bringing Unilever's in-market presence and their, such a strong footprint in market. The goal is really to increase digital access in a way that connects female entrepreneurs with the resources that they need to thrive in the modern economy. And you asked about innovations that are truly having an impact on the lives of women. And one initiative that we have done in a partnership with UNICEF is what we call the Learning Passport platform. And that's really has been focused on providing digital skills for girls and young women. And it was actually originally developed to help displaced young people, people on the move, continue their education, with the idea that if people are on the move, then their education should be on the move with them. But during COVID, we sort of pivoted and expanded Learning Passport to help facilitate learning at home, to help ensure continuity of formal education during the pandemic. So 7 countries are now deploying girl-centered content through the Learning Passport platform, which has been helpful and so critical, just given the acute impact that school closures during COVID has had on girls. So they're just a couple of examples of how innovations are helping in this space.
Fascinating how you're working at so many different levels and so many different markets with so many different types of partnerships. It really shows what can be done when you're committed to impact. I have a couple more questions and we only have about 10 minutes. So in a couple of minutes each, I'd love to know first, tell us about, of all the things that need to be done, and there's a lot of things that need to be done, but if you could wave a magic wand, what is one investment that you think women need most right now? So I'm going to start with, I know this is a hard question, but I'm going to start with Rachel, then Laura, and then Kate. So Rachel?
Well, it is hard, Elizabeth, to pick just one, but I will highlight the issue of care infrastructure, which has really been a priority of the administration. Of the many crises that the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated, as we talked about earlier, the caregiving crisis has really had a particularly dramatic impact. And while the pandemic put a bright light on this crisis, we know that this crisis isn't new. Across the world, even before the pandemic, women were responsible for nearly 3/4 of unpaid care work on average, which undermines their ability to participate in paid work. And they also make up the vast majority of the care workforce, who have been underpaid and undervalued for far too long. So child care, elder care, home care, too often are inaccessible and unaffordable, while at the same time, care workers scramble to care for their own families, even as they take care of others. So the administration is facing this caregiving crisis head on, making care central to our plans, and of course took early steps to tackle the crisis in the US through the American Rescue Plan, the president's first legislative package, and the president has put forward an ambitious vision for strengthening and reinforcing our country's care infrastructure that we continue to fight for. The administration also supports greater investment in the care economy, not only at home, but globally as well. So to close gender gaps in the global economy, we have to recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work, to value, compensate, and protect care workers who are too often relegated to the informal economy and forced to work under poor conditions for low pay. And we need to encourage and support government investment in systems that provide the care infrastructure that is so crucial for women's economic participation and that all of us will need at some point in our lives. So that is why the Build Back Better World initiative that was announced at the G7, which will invest in infrastructure in low and middle income countries, has a focus on gender equality. We're committed to working with partners in the public and private sector at home and abroad to elevate this issue on the international agenda, to leverage our voice in bilateral and multilateral fora, as well as through our foreign assistance to encourage greater investment in the care economy by donor nations and host countries. This is not just a women's issue, as we know, it's an economic issue, and it's a critical pillar of our vision to build back better for all.
Thank you, Rachel. You certainly picked a really important one. And Laura, what's your pick?
Rachel, I have to echo that because I could not agree more. As a mother, I share that perspective that, increasing that access to to caregiving is really important, and making it affordable for that kind of support. The one other investment that I would add, and it builds on something that Kate said, is an investment in financial and literacy and digital fluency in women. When women are empowered with the ability to use technology to their benefit and know how to navigate the financial system to advance their ideas as entrepreneurs, I think women thrive and win. And that kind of investment will have a strong return on it.
Again, great points. Thank you, Laura. Kate?
Well, I've already touched on connectivity and skilling. So connectivity and skilling, almost every job is going to require some level of digital fluency. And so, connectivity and skilling, I think, is key. But it's not enough to invest in skilling alone. If we think about improving livelihoods and helping women gain employment, it really requires a comprehensive approach. And one of the hurdles that we see women and girls face is often their unfounded belief that they can't do tech jobs, or that they can't actually get the digital fluency to open up, new livelihoods and new job opportunities. And this is where we see, nonprofit partnerships are just so important, because it's not just about investing in the skills and training, but also working with nonprofits that are thinking about the wraparound services that are so important, whether it's caregiving, so that women can actually, attend the training in the first place, whether it's connecting them to a mentor so that they can see other women in a similar role, or coaching ahead of job interviews and things like that.
Okay, all great picks. It's hard not to be overwhelmed in this brave new world of ours. And yet there are rays of hope. So in 1 minute, what is giving you hope as we look to the future? One ray of sunshine. Rachel, maybe you can kick us off in a minute.
Sure. What is really giving me hope at this moment are the courageous women leaders around the world who are at the forefront of change. And at this time of year, we're preparing for the International Women of Courage Awards, which will take place in mid-March. This is an award ceremony that's now in its 15th year, in which the Secretary of State recognizes women from around the world who have demonstrated exceptional courage and leadership in advocating for peace, for justice, human rights, gender equality, often at great personal risk and sacrifice. Since the inception of this award in 2007, the U.S. has recognized more than 155 women from over 75 countries. These are women who are raising their voices in the face of dire odds and making change happen, and they reflect millions of other women that we can't recognize but want to, and they give me hope. I hope you will join us later this month to salute their courage and to support their clarion call for change.
That's wonderful, Rachel. We'll all be there. They're always inspiring stories that lift all of us up. So thank you for helping to lead on that. Kate, what inspiration can you share?
Well, I think one thing that's giving me hope is the increasingly collaborative approach between governments, the private sector, nonprofits, to try and solve some of these issues, which we all know, and we all, always say these issues are too massive for any one company or one government or one industry to tackle alone. I think taking a multi-stakeholder approach really allows us to learn from each other, to lean into the strengths of different organisations, to share successes, but perhaps even more importantly, share challenges. I think that sometimes the more valuable lessons come from our challenges. So I think we're just seeing more openness to collaborating in new and different ways. So I think that's probably what's giving me hope, as well as the power of women and girls around the world.
I love it, Kate. I mean, it doesn't happen without a solid ecosystem, and all of you are helping to lead this ecosystem. And I just hope on behalf of the rest of the world, how grateful we are. Laura, what was giving you hope right now?
So what's giving me hope right now is that when you look across the panoply of businesses that are out there, more and more businesses aren't just saying it, they're showing it. UPS is one example. We have the most amazing woman CEO. I am part of almost half women making up our executive leadership team, and almost half of our boards of directors are now women. If a company like UPS that had been traditionally in a male-dominant industry can be led by great women, that is powerful change in the works. And the second part, I know you said one ray of light and hope, but you know, I also see the amazing he for she movement that's out there. That gives me incredible hope. There are more and more men that recognize when women are asking for a seat at the table, it's not us versus them, it's we. And more men are being champions along our side saying, yes, women need an equal seat at the table, equal opportunity to engage in the global economy, and they're right there alongside us. And that's how the world's going to change, when we do it together, because we're stronger united.
I love it. It's a call to action. Laura, Kate, Rachel, I am inspired. And we all need this right now because it can be very overwhelming, and we just all have to remember that we're not in this alone. There are ways for us to take action. There are ways for us to collaborate, to partner, to build public-private partnerships, leverage the incredible civil society infrastructure around the world, making sure that women are front and center in making decisions about them. So I know all of you do that every single day, and I do hope that we all think about ways we can take action, whether it's giving a woman business opportunity a chance to sell her products or services. We all have purchasing power. Women have $20 trillion in purchasing power under their control or influence. So we are powerful already. We just need to wield it, be comfortable leveraging it. And because when we do, everyone's better off. Families, communities, and we all know that that's true. We have ways to invest in each other. And so thank you for being sources of inspiration in this space, along with, of course, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, who continues to lead in this area fearlessly and proudly, and very proud to be a partner with all of you. Thank you. Turn it back over to the foundation.